Okay, so hopefully you have viewed the Chapter 10 Part 1, and you have also taken the time to look at the situational theory in terms of organizational crises, and I think that is very important. I hope you found it beneficial. It linked many different variables in this concept and throughout the whole chapter, the whole textbook, as a matter of fact, which is one of the reasons I felt that it was really important. So, So we've looked at the idea of organizational change, and certainly effective leadership is critical in that change process, but the importance of leadership is not limited to times of change. So now we're going to go to the second part of the chapter and take a look at leadership in general. I'm going to start out with a video. This one's short, so I'm going to go ahead and just show it within this. I think it's about 2 minutes or less. Okay, so obviously that video is an advertisement promoting a particular website, but it's a nice introduction in terms of the significance of organizational leadership. And here, this section again talks about some of the models of leadership. And you know, the old models were a traditional trait model and style model. Trait models, here we have a listing of the most common traits of leadership. Excuse me, the idea of intelligence, self-confidence, determination, integrity, and sociability. So another view suggested, rather than looking at inherent traits that either somebody is born with or not, that there are different styles of leadership. And again, these are going to connect back to Blake and Newton's leadership grid. And you can find these illustrated in the chapter. I believe, let me flip through my book in front of me. Is it listed, the exact chapter? No, you'll have to go back and look at the chapter that had the actual grid, and I was thinking there was a table in chapter 10, which I have in front of me, but I don't see that. But you have to go back, and I'm sure that you'll find it relatively easily. We've looked at it a couple of times in a couple of different chapters. So whether it's a particular trait that a leader has or does not have, or a particular leadership style that can be learned, both of these approaches have fallen a little bit into disfavor. They're not quite as endorsed as they used to be, for a number of different reasons. The idea of an ideal leadership, they say that's contrary to experience. There is no one ideal, and so that sort of debunks most of the premise that underscores trait and style leadership models. They also argue that within these models, the role of communication is pretty much non-existent. And so instead, there's been a shift to what has been called a transformational leadership model. And in this idea of transformational leadership model, it's basically the fundamental idea that you lead by example, and that you lead in such a way that allows people to want to follow or want to imitate. And so there's very much this notion of exemplification, that they illustrate the concept. Going on, looking at some of the communication involved in leadership. Uh, a lot of critical things here. And by the way, the discussion board that we're going to do focuses on leadership. And particularly, I want you to focus on the communication aspect of leadership. And it should be really beneficial to to all of us. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you generate. But a leader needs to be able to understand and communicate visionary content. If you have not taken the time to listen to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, that is the classic example. Just Google it. There's a couple of different places. It is absolutely worth your time. But you can watch somebody who was a master at visionary content and being able to communicate that to allow your constituency to get vision. So, so it's certainly the what, the content is important, but it's also how something is said. And that includes both your timing, your delivery style, all the nonverbals that are a critical part of delivery. Like it or not, delivery, how you say something, quite frankly, is more important than what you say. And I know that sounds wrong, but it's been validated, and that it's how things work, and it's how we respond to information. Years ago, an experiment was done at a medical conference, and there were several hundred physicians in attendance, very educated men and women who were at this particular medical conference. The experiment involved the keynote speaker, where basically an actor was hired, was given a script promoting a new medical tool or advancement, and the speaker was very charismatic. He incorporated humor into his content. He was very descriptive, had a great vocal tone. Just was a wonderful individual in terms of speaking skills and able to listen to. Had the audience engaged the entire time during his presentation, and basically elucidated on a lot of medical nonsense. There were biological inconsistencies with what he had to say. He was promoting a medical technique that was illogical, ill-contrived, and frankly didn't exist. And had it existed, it would have failed. And after the speaker sat down to resounding applause, the audience was given a chance to offer their feedback, and it was a resounding, oh my goodness, best keynote speaker we have ever heard. About time this conference, which is, has a strong reputation for having really dull keynote speakers, got somebody. This was fantastic. I look forward to implementing these procedures in my own practice as soon as I get back home. I mean, just a lot of validation and endorsement of the speaker, of what he had to say, even though it was ridiculous, but because it was delivered in a very strong manner, it was endorsed, and people were thrilled and eager to follow. Later, of course, they were told about the actual content, that it was bogus and not to follow it. But that's a very strong lesson. These are educated men and women, and they very much were swayed by the delivery. So how you say something, frankly, is more important than what you say. Not that you should neglect that, but you should put a great deal of attention into how you communicate. Most particular is the use of language. I believe that we have so much attention put on the ways that we can cause damage to one another, whether legally or whether physically in terms of weapons. And there's a lot of legal constraints regarding that, what you can and cannot say in terms of slander, profanity, in terms of what you can and cannot do, in terms of weaponry and physical violence. And yet there are virtually very, very few, except really conscience, constraints on what you say. And with your words, you have the ability to build up and the ability to destroy. And with your words, you can basically control meaning. You can control perception through language. And so Farhest and Sarr looked at this idea of leadership as the ability to frame a situation, and that you can control things by the language that you use. And that may sound very manipulative, but it is very effective and can have a tremendous amount to do with how things are phrased. Think of even in terms of in the Christian paradigm, how people will simply change the name of what is a black and white sin in the New Testament, slap on a new name, and it becomes something that they can live with. You know, it's just an ability to frame, and so people will do that, and uh, it's what occurs. I'm not saying it's right. It's what occurs. And so effective leaders begin that framing process. That can be done ethically and it can be done unethically. So hopefully you're going to go out into the organizational world as an ethical Christian organizational leader one day, and having that ability to begin to frame and to create meaning is a very profound skill to master. And so also, of course, the notion of understanding context and the whole notion of linguistic framing. So that's pretty much it for this chapter. You've looked at a lot of information, you've examined a lot, and I really look forward to seeing what you write about in the writing assignment and what you come up with in the discussion board. That's it for now.